In this episode of The Shadows Project, we meet multi-award-winning American journalist Dan Tynan. Dan's work has appeared in more than 75 publications, including Newsweek, Family Circle, Popular Science, Wired, and Playboy.com. He has also written for The Guardian and is famed for his humorous takes on technology.
Where is your accent from? I love the way you talk.
my accent's from Liverpool, yeah. I assume you mean me because Ahmed speaks very clearly. So when you said accents, I thought you meant me.
But he wears a lot of hats, so, it sort of balances out. Liverpool, okay, that makes sense. I couldn't figure out if you were Welsh, honestly, but, my ear for UK accents isn't as strong as it is for American accents. So anyway, thank you.
Well, I've lived abroad for like 10 years. It's actually become milder. And if I spoke like I did 12 years ago, you probably need like subtitles,
Yeah. Well, as a total tangent, not answering your question, I was born in New York and Long Island specifically, and I moved to California when I was about 11, and I had the nickname the New Yorker.
Oh, okay.
Because of the way I spoke.
Yeah.
Because I used to talk like this all the time. You come from Long Island, you talk like this. So I had to unlearn that.
That's it. Yeah, it takes time.
So I totally get that. Anyway, I am probably as unlikely a technology journalist as you are probably going to meet, because I'm closetly a Luddite. In the closet, in secret. If it wasn't for the fact that I started working for technology magazines a long time ago, I probably would be one of those people who are cranky and doesn't want to use a cell phone, right? So I don't have a natural affinity for it. But in fact, when I was in college back in, the last millennium, I decided, computers were going to be it, right? This is the early 80s. And I better learn something about them. So I took a Pascal programming course, 2 credits, self-paced, pass, not pass. And I would go to the computer lab, and I would sit down with my exercises and, at the keyboard, and along with all these other nerdy people. And I'd wake up 2 hours later with my face on the keyboard. Because it was so boring. I failed that class. Right? So, this is before video games. Back in those days, video games were like Pong, This was the dark ages of technology. And so I thought, okay, that's it. I'm done. I can't. But I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area. I had an English degree from Berkeley, go Bears, and I needed a job. I ended up getting a job at a computer magazine. And I lived in the Bay Area, and at the time, there wasn't a lot of publishing options. If you weren't going to live in New York, for example, and you wanted to work in magazines, your options were largely technology magazines. And so what happened was all these people in the Bay Area who had editorial aspirations, writers and editors and artists, ended up working for computer magazines, and kind of that's how I got started.
Wow. That's great. They're a big thing in America, aren't they? Like, there's people, technology and computers are like huge nowadays. Yeah. So like the Apple phone, like when I was in Berkeley at the Apple store, whatever, in San Francisco or something, the new phone came out and there was like queues and queues and queues just to get this new phone. And that's the new cool, So in the past, like when like rock, music and cinema, and that was the big thing. Now, lots of the money is in games and computers, and it's just a totally different world. So for people like mine, people our age, it's like it's a bit of a minefield to understand. So your writing, like even by just listening to you for a few minutes, puts it across in like a more humanistic way, a more accessible way, because it's often, like you said, lots and lots of nerds and things. So you had a book called Annoyances. Yeah, computer privacy annoyances. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that book, which I wrote back in like 2004, 2005, God, was part of a series. O'Reilly Books, which is one of the top technology book publishers, and they're based pretty close to where I live now, in Sebastopol, California. And they put out a series of books called the Annoyances books, because they were basically aimed at consumers, aimed at normal people like you, and taking the things that frustrated them most about a particular thing and answering questions in a very clear, direct, and hopefully entertaining way. And so the privacy book was part of that. And I actually hate the fact that it was in the Annoyances series, but that's what they did. So it was all, I have, I want to do this, and am I at risk for that? That kind of thing. And it was so early. I mean, when I wrote the book, I was sort of pointing ahead. In the end of the book, I sort of point out at the future of what's going to happen over the next 10 years. And I say location privacy is going to be enormous. And of course it is now, right? Because of the very thing you mentioned, those iPhones.
Yeah.
So I am still, privacy has been one of the 2 or 3 or 4 subspecialties that I have focused on in my career in writing about technology. And it's, the concerns have only gotten worse, honestly. The purpose of the book was to give people a strategy for how to deal with this stuff. And increasingly, it's getting difficult to have a strategy to deal with this stuff.
Yeah, man, Amit, you read through this book. You want to ask some questions? Yeah, I mean,
it's a blast in the past, isn't it? It's like really old.
Yeah. I know. Well, that's what I was going to ask. Is there going to be a number 2 at some point? But we'll ask that at the end. Yeah. Part 2. Yeah. Okay, Amit.
Yeah. So Dan, I guess I'm going to first start off with my work hat on, and someone who's got to manage staff, someone who's got to find very efficient and effective tools to communicate, especially the last sort of 12 months when most of my staff have been working at home remotely. I guess the question I've got is, having tried all these different, whether it's Google Chat or Hangouts or, whether it's trying to use the old-fashioned email. I'm one of those people who likes to keep it simple, so I don't want to bombard, everybody with different, 5 or 6 different forms of communication. So my question was, have you come across a tool that you would say kind of ranks
ranks the highest? I'm guessing he's
right. Yeah, I think he froze right here.
Yeah. He's saluting you. Yeah.
Back at you, dude. I think what he's asking me is what tools to use to collaborate with his people. And I'm not really an expert on that. I use what everyone else uses. So and because some people use Zoom, as we are on Zoom now, and that's pretty predominant. It just exploded over the last year. But and some people use Google Meetings, which used to be Google Chat. Some people use Microsoft Teams. And some people use WebEx. Oh God, one of my clients uses WebEx, and everyone who uses it hates it. So it's all these corporate standards that they've inherited, not knowing how vital they would become.
How do they get these things up and running from the start? Because for example, when like last month or the month before, we had the Trump thing where he got kicked off Twitter. Yeah, I didn't want to go on about Trump. He got kicked off Twitter, and then he went to Parler, which is an app I didn't know anything about. Yeah.
Oh.
And so he went to Parler, and now everybody knows Parler because he went to it. Everyone in England who didn't know before. And then this, and I just thought, a man as powerful as Trump, for example, couldn't he create his own version of Twitter or Parler? I mean, with the team, I know not by himself, but with the team of people, is that not possible?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's possible to create anything. Getting traction, of course, is the thing. And you're right, because you hadn't heard of Parler until Twitter finally booted him, and hats off to Jack for that. It's a long time coming. But I had heard of it because I work in this industry, and it was started a few years ago as an alternative to Twitter and other social platforms that were starting to enforce rules about behavior that they should have been enforcing for much longer. The problem got so bad that they actually had to start enforcing their codes of conduct on a large scale. And so it's entirely possible that someone like Trump, assuming he actually has the money he claims he has, could build something like that. But it makes a lot more sense to tack onto an existing platform that already has an audience, right? Because building an audience from zero is, as you probably know, with a YouTube channel, difficult, right?
He's kicked off them all, though. That's the problem.
Well, you won't be kicked off Parler, or you won't be kicked off Gab. Gab.ai is the other one. And, Parler is pretty bad, but Gab is just a cesspool. So
he wasn't kicked off Parler, was he? He was Google stopped putting it on their app store, and so did Apple.
Yes, right. They dropped the app. Amazon dropped the hosting for Parler, and so Parler had to find a new host that was willing to put up with it, and and rebuild. And now who knows what they're using to plot their little plots. But
he needs to create a new search engine.
Yeah,
a mobile phone.
And they'll name them all Trump. Because that's all he's interested really is seeing his name.
Yeah.
Reflected back at him. So it's actually it's a large undertaking to both technologically to build a platform like that, but actually harder, get people to use it.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the reason Facebook is so dominant, is because it got so big, nobody else can compete anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Amit, you're back. Yeah, I think we can't hear you now. You're muted. Unmute. Yeah. Can you hear me now? I don't know. You're too nervous. You were too excited to meet Dan. Yeah.
I don't know where you guys lost me. I'm sorry.
You're holding your hand up here. You're talking about communication tools.
Yeah. Okay.
So you were like you had the knowledge of technology before Mark Zuckerberg was in. Is it Zuckerberg? I can't say his name. Was it was in Nappies. This got said, and then he came along, and then with Facebook, but there was other things the same as Facebook before. So why was this big explosion with Facebook?
Friendster and MySpace.
Yeah, MySpace. Yeah,
back in the day, back in the ancient days, back in the day.
There was another one called Ringo. Another one of these. Ringo.
Okay. Yeah. I think it was probably just strictly for Liverpool.
Yeah,
that one.
That's it.
Yeah. A lot of good uptake there. No, there were, what was it, tribal.net, and, social media platforms had been around 4 or 5 years before Facebook. And Facebook really didn't, have a huge impact until like 4 or 5 years after it had launched. MySpace was the big kahuna, and it had like 33 million people. Most of them teenagers with really bad taste. And so it was sort of the trailer trash of social media platforms. I had a MySpace account. We all did. And then Facebook just exploded. And the reason it exploded actually was because they opened it up for apps. They opened up the Facebook code and enabled people to build apps on top of it, and specifically apps like Farmville and Peopleville, games that were extremely viral and very cunning in how they spread themselves. So, and that's really what caused Facebook to explode, was all these other apps. Mm-hmm. Just like, the iPhone is a brilliant piece of engineering, but it's the App Store is the reason people use it, right? Yeah. It's what you can do with it. It's the other things people can build on top of your platform that make your platform successful. And those are, that's the reason why we all have, a very expensive tracking device in our pockets.
Yeah.
Because of the apps.
And people have been saying, what this COVID vaccine they're going to be able to track us. And then I've been saying, well, they can track us anyway with our phones. Much more reliable because it's something you were using all the time, right? So, but social media, first social networks were in the late 90s. Yeah. So just they kind of, how many of these things are like it's just timing sometimes, they get in at the right time rather than.
Well, it's funny, I was thinking about this. It's never the ones who invent it that have the greatest success, right? It's the ones who capitalize on it. Yeah. So, you look at Facebook, and Facebook was not the first social network by a long stretch. You look at the iPhone, the iPhone was not the first smartphone by a long stretch. Just like the iPod was not the first MP3 player. But what it was they looked at all the others in the market and said, okay, how can we do this better? and then how can we package it in a way that makes it accessible to a lot of people? And that's the success of Apple, was their ability to take, their technology and package it in a way that made it seem different.
Yeah.
So, it's partly timing, but it's, a lot of it is just simply market power.
And thinking slightly outside the box as well.
Well, I mean,
like the gold rush in America. They say in the gold rush that one of the guys who made the most money from everyone, not the guy who dug for gold, it was the guy who sold the shovels.
Picks and shovels, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it was talking earlier about the tools to use in corporations, and that's the bulk. I mean, we look at the stuff we have in our pockets and on our desks, and we think that's the computer industry, but it's much, much bigger, and the much, much bigger part is selling to businesses. So what's B2B, business to business sales, enterprise. Yeah,
I've got some questions on that, but I'll let Amit step in first. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. So Dan, another thing that I have to be very careful about as a parent is technology use, and I was just wondering now, we're coming up to this this new decade, and it's clear that the kids that were born around the 2000 time, the millennials, they're kind of grown up with technology, whereas probably Tim and I and you, we remember a time before the internet and smartphones and that kind of thing. So I was joking with Tim earlier about when my daughter first asked for an Alexa, not really understanding exactly what having a gadget like that in the house might do. So I know you've written a few things, and you wrote about privacy and having smart gadgets in the house. What's your opinion about how intrusive these kind of gadgets can be, and even including things like now we're being bombarded with requests for smart energy meters, and on top of having smart TVs and Alexa. So what is it, a slippery slope, or is it inevitable that everything's going to be smart in the house soon?
Apart from the people, yeah.
Devices are getting smarter, people are getting dumber.
Yeah.
That's human de-evolution. First, my sympathies. I know you said you had a daughter who is just about entering high school. That is such a tough age. My kids are now in their 20s, but I have to say I made a fair amount of bank writing about it, because the kids were kind of test subjects in many ways. I wrote a column for Yahoo for a while called Modern Family about just this very question, is how you manage technology devices with your kids.
And app, there's a video of you with an app with the tongue, with the dog ears and all this.
Oh, like Snap. Yeah. No. God. Yeah, I think there actually is out there. Who knows what my internet history has? It'll be scary. But so it's constantly changing. It's a constantly changing landscape. And now you mentioned TikTok earlier. Kids are now expecting to be stars. And some of them are, and some of them are making very serious money at very young ages, through just the mass commercialization of these things. If you became a TikTok star or an Instagram star, you can make serious coin from brands who just want you to hold their brand up or to talk about it, right? So our kids are getting exposed very early to the expectation that they're on screen, they're on stage. So you have all that, right? And then you have things like smart devices, and I am of two minds about these things. The privacy hat I wear says, you should be very wary of these things, very cautious. On the other hand, I'm surrounded by them. I got them everywhere. Got one sitting on my desk right here. I have a bunch upstairs. I spend a third of my day talking to inanimate devices. And it comes down to, do you trust the vendors and what they say their devices do in terms of collecting information? I've talked to Amazon a few times, and they're, these devices are always listening. And at some point, they're supposed to stop listening for their wake word. And they're supposed to only record and store and act upon commands once they hear the wake word. And we kind of have to take them at their word for it at this point. But I think it would be good moving forward if there were a way of auditing that. If there were some independent organization that could go in and really, look at what these devices are doing and certify that they are only doing what their vendors claim they're doing. And it gets into a topic that fascinates me that not very many people talk about. And it's the degree to which our lives are being run by algorithms, and driven by artificial intelligence and machine learning, which is Alexa. Alexa is a series of algorithms driven by machine learning. And they've learned over the last 10 years or so, done a really good job of understanding language. That's the thing. Natural language processing is the official term for it. But I mean, that's what Alexa does. It's what Siri does. It's what, the Google voice assistant does. And then, they have this amazing trove of recordings and information, and they could do a lot more with it than they're doing. They could do things like sentiment analysis. They could tell if you're happy or sad. You can tell if you're angry. They could, conceivably, if you allow it, say, Alexa could say, you sound really frustrated and tense right now. Maybe you could use, a drink. Maybe you could use a massage. Here's $10 off a massage coupon, right? So, I mean, we're looking at that kind of future from these things.
Wow.
Well, are they,
okay.
Like Snowden, Edward Snowden?
Yes.
Or these things where is this how? No, it's true, yeah. So it's a true thing, but how widespread is this problem? Do you think? Like, would the government use all these things to spy on you, and they can watch you? I mean, I don't know why they'd want to watch me. There's nothing to watch. Well,
that's the thing. That is the thing. That's the defense everyone uses. Well, there's two things. One, what I've been talking about has been commercial use of this technology, not the political or government use. But conceivably, political or government use could be as simple as, giving a court order to Amazon. And this has happened multiple times. Police departments have submitted subpoenas to Amazon to get recordings from their devices that were in people's homes where a crime was committed. They want to know if there was, if they can get evidence from that. So there's a short leap from that into, we want to tap into your device because we believe this person is a terrorist.
Yeah.
Right. So, and, the NSA stuff is scary. And, Ed Snowden, which was now 2013, I think, a long time ago, seems like a lot longer. Revealed this up, and his whole point was, we have the technology. We can do this. This is way more sophisticated than anything you've seen in a Hollywood movie. There's not anything we can do about that except, hope that we're not a target. Mm-hmm. And so, what Tim said earlier was, well, why would they want to listen to me? I'm the same way. Why would anyone want to listen to me? But I have no idea why you want to interview me. Right?
That's like I said, because you bring humor and technology, and humor is very important to make people listen. Yeah, you see lots of academics and experts in their field, but they just kill you with the boringness, and they're actually very interesting, but they just don't articulate it properly. It's like you said in some piece of writing that people use buzzwords, and they use these fake this fake persona to try and sound intellectual rather than just getting the point across. And getting the point across is is what it's about. So when you asked me why do I want to interview, it was because of this, because you're noted for bringing humor to technology. So this humor that brings the subject alive, whatever the subject is, and this is like the power of writing and the power of humor to make people interested in things they normally probably would shy away from, especially at our age.
Well, we know Dan was an English major now, so that's probably why he's got that.
And a very good speller, I should say.
Yeah. So Amit, did you have an?
I did. I'm putting another hat on, Dan. So Dan, obviously, there's a part of me which has always been curious, and I think around 2014, 2015, I picked up a book, a Martin Ford book called Rise of the Robots, talking about technology, and it just really sparked an interest. And for the last 5-6 years, I've been kind of reading stuff. And then obviously you've written a really good piece about, the replacement of people through automation, through AI. So, yeah, I guess my question was really, since then I've been thinking about whether my job, back then I was a teacher, now I'm, running a training company for apprenticeships. And I guess my question is, do you think that, are we going to benefit in the sense that maybe the things that, our parents or grandparents begrudgingly did for work, to pay the bills, that all of that will be done by machines, so we can really do the good stuff, the fun stuff, maybe more creative things, more right brain kind of activities? Or do you feel that it's going to cause more of a economic upheaval, where because there's not so many jobs, that people are going to find it even harder to survive, no blue collar jobs, or things that everybody would expect humans to do, even I've heard like accountants and lawyers, and maybe even, my old job as a teacher, that could be replaced. So what do you think? Are we heading for a brighter future, or is it a little bit kind of unexpected what's happening?
You're asking a lifelong diehard cynic, which is kind of an occupational hazard. But so the answer to your question is yes. All of that's going to happen, all of it. So there are going to be jobs that are completely supplanted by machines. There's going to be jobs that are augmented by machines. They already are. We are talking on a machine that augments our jobs right now, right? So there's going to be a lot of elimination of very simple tasks. At the same time, they aren't necessarily all blue-collar tasks. The folks, I wrote a story for The Guardian. I think you may have been referencing that one about, and that was based on a study from Oxford in 2013, which said something like 48% of all jobs will be audited. But that doesn't mean 48% of all jobs will be eliminated. It means 48% of the tasks involved in jobs. So some of your tasks will be automated and some won't. Right? So you might still, be doing that. And teaching, a lot of it is already automated, right? Giving tests, things like that. Things that used to be manual are now automated. They're part of the job and you don't even think about it. But one of the jobs that's likely to be replaced is airline pilot. They're already being flown by robots. They're being flown by wire. It's the takeoff and the landing that you have a human being in the seat for. And they're mostly there in case something goes wrong. It's like driverless cars. These days there's 5 levels of driverless. We're at level 4. And level 4 requires a human behind the wheel. Level 5 does not. So think of any job that requires driving: taxi cab, bus driver, truck driver. Those jobs are going to be automated. Airline pilot will be automated. Plumber and electrician won't, because we haven't built a machine that can do that yet, right? At least not for the short term. So it's going to be spotty. It's going to be all over the place. It's going to be unevenly distributed. So it's going to cause a lot of displacement for certain types of people and certain types of jobs in certain areas. Do you like this progression? Do you have to say yes for your job? Like, do you like this sort of jump into like this modern world? Because I have this romantic idea, about the past with postcards and actually speaking and doing things face to face rather than You mean like face to face, person to person?
All that weird stuff, yeah. But do you like this idea that you can't, you go down a shop and you don't have somebody selling your food, you just put it through yourself, or is it?
I've always, through my career, I've always been the one who points out and says, watch out for that.
Yeah.
There are people who do what I do who are very, gung ho about technology, and I'm not one of them. Mm-hmm. I can see the benefits. I think it's a very 50-50 thing, right?
Yeah.
I can see the benefit of Facebook. I can see how nice it is to keep track of your old high school friends without having to call them, and actually talk to them.
Or they call you and you don't want to speak to them,
Exactly. Right.
Like, I'm meant to call them in, honestly.
He calls and talks to me about you all the time. He never picks up. He never talks to me. So Facebook has, very positive aspects, but it also has these really horrible negative aspects, like its ability to spread propaganda. So it's always a mixed bag. It's always 50-50, right? We all like the things that automate the parts of the job we don't like, but we don't want to be replaced by a robot. To do a double major in English and journalism, and then the month I show up, they say, "Oh, we stopped that program." So I ended up studying English and doing essentially a minor in journalism. But my dream was always to be a magazine editor. I always wanted to be on the staff of the magazine. And ideally, if I had a time machine, I would go back in time and I would be on, the staff of the New Yorker in 1928. Yeah. I mean, that was my ideal. And again, I don't know how relevant this is to you guys, but that's kind of like the classic, and it's pretty common among the writers because they had such a brilliant staff and it was such a great time. The 1920s were like the 1960s. They were this time of radical change. And this was a brand new magazine, that was kind of promoting it to the world. And so that's kind of what I wanted to be, after I got out of school.
Well, and so can that dream happen moving forward? Or?
It did. It happened in a way I didn't expect. The other thing I wanted to do was I wanted to work for Rolling Stone because I wanted to, be a rock and roll journalist.
Okay.
And
so which bands did you like the Grateful Dead and all these, or no?
Too hippie, way too hippie for me.
Oh yeah, right.
the era where I grew up, the Clash.
The Clash, yeah.
The Clash, the Pretenders, X, Elvis Costello, Graham Parker. That was my era right there.
Graham Parker, I only know Graham Parker from that film. This Is 40.
I was so happy Judd Apatow put Graham Parker in that movie because he clearly is as big a Graham Parker fan as I am.
He gets him in, doesn't he? Thinking he's all, it's cool and all that, and everyone's just looking at this old guy saying
right, the skinny old dude saying, "Who is he?" Yeah, so you have to have a certain age to appreciate him, and I am, and I don't think you are. But so I wanted to be a rock and roll journalist, but I ended up working in the computer industry, and I realized later. Computers are to my generation as rock and roll was to that generation. In the 1960s, it was music that was changing the world. Mm-hmm. And Rolling Stone was there covering it. And in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, it was technology that was changing the world. And I was privileged to have a front row seat, watch it happen.
Okay.
Well, I was just thinking, funnily enough, last Sunday, we were speaking to Paul Hollis, an author who's written a great book I read, The Hollow Man, and he was telling us about growing up, going to Woodstock, growing up in the 60s, and the whole thing about the Chicago 7, and obviously it's before our time, but when you were saying you kind of missed when you got there in 1980 to university, you kind of missed that whole, that radical generation. But I think I don't know what it's like in the US, but I feel like there is a kind of a feeling of activism that's coming up. Maybe because there's so many causes, whether it's climate change, inequality, whether it's political change or whatever the current things are. But it does seem like the youth are changing a little bit, and I feel like they use technology to gather together and to for example, we had mass protests in London last year and even before the lockdown. There's definitely a kind of energy which I don't remember so much. I'm kind of too young for. I know there was a lot of protest against Margaret Thatcher in the 80s. When
Stand down, Margaret. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, it's interesting. As a 40-something, to see this youthful energy being directed towards some kind of cause. But Dan, I was just wondering, when it comes to things like I remember talking to my students in a humanities class about the problem like fake news, and I was teaching overseas, and it'd been a terrible incident where a WhatsApp message had been spread around. It almost spread like wildfire, and it was clearly fake news, but people had been a mob. This is in India. There'd been a mob that had acted on it and killed an innocent person. And we were discussing, these are, 13, 14-year-olds. We were discussing how to discern what is real in terms of news and information. And then obviously in that humanities space, thinking about critical thinking. So I mean, what in the age of information, what do you see is the way that we can educate ourselves and our children and the next generation about, really filtering or siphoning out all the information that you're bombarded with, and trying to get to the real facts or the real kind of truth behind things.
Well, I think it's great that you're teaching media literacy. I think it's going to be one of the key survival skills, certainly over the next 20 years. I mean, my kids are much smarter about technology than I am. I have a son who's 24 and studying computer engineering, and a daughter who's 22. And they grew up with this stuff. They are, I can't remember the word now for it. Digital natives. They're both digital natives. So, and they have a much more cynical view about technology. They're very skeptical about things, which is great. And I think embracing skepticism is a good idea. I think there are a lot of people who aren't, but I think more so the newer generations, Gen Z, coming up, I think they're a lot smarter about it than our generation and our parents, certainly our parents' generations, who were used to, I think they were used to more believing what they heard and saw from the media, and now, of course, we have the problem with false rumors, and we have the problem with deliberate propaganda. And that problem is going to get a lot worse because of something known as deep fakes. You guys may be familiar with it, but basically using AI to create, events that never happened, to create videos as evidence of things that didn't actually happen. And so I know there's also an effort to try and use AI to identify deep fakes. So we're about to have this kind of Cold War between different branches of AI that are trying to fool us and trying to help us. And I don't know who's going to win, but it's going to get a lot more difficult to tell what is real and what isn't real over the next 10 or 20 years. And more so for folks in your generation, my generation, and above than below.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes, like when you see the image on the screen, and somebody looks really beautiful or handsome or whatever, and you meet them in real life, they look terrible. Terrible.
It's the opposite with me. I look like this on screen, but in person, I am really.
That's what I was going to say. Like, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, Brad Pitt's in real life. Yeah. So you have a blog called the Wit List.
Oh my God, you really did. You cyberstalked me clearly, because. That is so old. I started a satirical or political blog in 2004.
Yeah.
As a result of George W. Bush being reelected, and I did it for about 3.5 years, and I finally gave up because, as a friend of mine put it, it's difficult to play to an empty room.
Yeah.
And I think probably if I'd stuck with it, I probably would have gotten enough traction to get some readers. Yeah. But these days, there's certainly a lot more infrastructure for doing that. Something called Substack has become widely known in the last year or two. And a lot of journalists have left publications and started their own brands on Substack. And, they sell subscriptions. And they're doing quite well. But back in those days, didn't really exist. So yes, I had a blog called The Wit List. I had a few other blogs over the years. And it's just really hard to sustain it.
Yeah. How do you get traction, for example, on YouTube? Yeah. I see, like I'm always looking at the analytics, so I'm thinking, okay, like this video got more retention. Yeah, this other video, like I don't know the difference because the thumbnail, people will say it's about the thumbnail, it's about tag words, it's about all these different things, and I just can't. I don't know. I just find it difficult to believe. I find it to understand which one. Sorry, because like for example, Twitter, you can put a tweet out. It can be an interesting tweet. Nobody will look at it. You can put a tweet out. I see people put some stupid tweet out saying something ridiculous, like, what books do you read on a Friday night? And I'm thinking, why do you care? And there's like 10,000 people reply. And I'm thinking, how did they get retweeted for this? So I'll put like this video up, yeah? And like, I'll maybe make an interesting title. Dan Tynan, technology guru.
That's going to kill your readership right there. You're going to see that and go, oh, God, not that guy again.
So how do you get traction on these things? I just don't understand.
Well, nor do I, unfortunately. So, I mean, there are people who do understand this. I mean, it's very hard to do it. What you're talking about is doing it organically.
Yeah.
Which is, throwing it out there, hoping it sticks to the wall, hoping somebody famous sees it sticking to the wall and likes it. I think a lot of it is piggybacking on, people with large followings.
Yeah.
And as you were describing this, the name Sarah Cooper comes up. And you probably don't know who Sarah Cooper is, but she is an actress and comedian. She grew a huge following last spring by basically just by doing Donald Trump, taking his audio recordings and acting them out. So basically, she was lip syncing to Donald Trump, and she was sort of expressing the internal life inside his skull as he's talking. And she was just doing it on TikTok, and whatever. And she blew up. She became huge. She went from like a couple thousand followers to 500,000 followers. Yeah. And the reason she became huge is, one, they were very funny. They were very good. So they became very viral, and very famous people started, Hollywood celebrities started sharing and commenting on it. Mm-hmm. And, then, she rode this little bit of fame, and she got a Netflix series out of it. So, but it is that sort of thing where, if the right person sees it and shares it, it has a lot more impact.
Do you feel like you should be richer than Mark Zuckerberg because you know more? Do you feel like, why has this little kid got loads of money?
Yeah, I mean, I suck at this. I really do. I do not know how to promote myself at all. Yeah. And, so, I mean, I have managed to get like 10,000 followers on Twitter, but that's that's as famous as I get, really. So, and that's not enough. 10,000 is not enough, because, as you say, you do a tweet, you think it's really good, and 6 people see it.
Well, that's why I'm doing this channel. Yeah, hopefully, I've only got I haven't focused on it this year. I'm going to focus on it, and we're going to do different chats with different writers. And even now, I've just done a few so far. I've got some good ones in the pipeline, coming up, some good ones. But even now, I can see some connections between people. So, we had Paul Hollis on last week, and he worked for BMI. Is it BMI, the computer? Yeah. And he was in surveillance and all these things he did in the 80s.
IBM, yeah.
IBM. Sorry, right. Body mass index. Yeah.
Yeah.
IBM.
Changed my existence. Yeah.
IBM. No, IBM. He worked for IBM, and he done surveillance for them. After he was a spy, sort of spy, wasn't he? Gathering information for the American government in Europe. Nice. So he's got 80,000 followers, yeah, on Twitter, and he sells his books through this, yeah. But someone like him and you together will be a really interesting chat. So the idea was to get people on again and again and again, just mix different combinations. Yeah,
Yeah, well, I would say that if for you, finding authors that have followings and interviewing them and piggybacking off their audience would be a thing to do. Another thing would be cross-platform promotion. Yeah. So you have your YouTube channel, you have Twitter, but you should be on Quora. Yeah. Are you familiar with Quora?
No, I'll look at what is it? Coral? How's it spelled?
Quora.
Yes.
Quora. Sorry, yeah, I know. Yeah. Sorry.
So I write. I do silly stuff on Quora. It's one of the few places where I write for free. Yeah. Because I'm usually procrastinating something, but I mean there are a lot of writers on there. And you could put, you could start promoting it in the writers' groups there. You could promote it in Facebook groups.
I would say we could only do people though who, we genuinely find interesting, or if it was somebody just famous, I don't know what's her name, Paris Hilton. I couldn't sit with a serious face and talk to Paris Hilton and say,
I think it would be brilliant, actually, to interview Paris Hilton and ask her really serious, in-depth questions. Yeah. See what she says. And it'd be even greater if she answered in really, you can even stage it where she comes up with a really, sophisticated answer. Yeah. You would blow up.
Yeah.
We could prep her beforehand on a really complex.
Exactly. You know, yeah, and totally blow people's minds. So, but that's, I think, I mean, you know, speaking as someone who hasn't been very good at promoting, but that's what I would do is I would spread your bets.
Yeah.
You know, I would look for more high profile folks to interview that are accessible, and some of them are. Some, you know, certainly anyone with a new book out will want to, you know, spread the word as much as possible. And yeah, but you know, also maybe you want to, and I'm giving you unsolicited advice here. Maybe you want to chop these into smaller segments and share them, you know, broadly. Like here's a 2-minute segment, and you share it on Twitter, and you see that for the full video, go here.
Yeah.
You know, you can give away some of it for free. I mean, it's all for free, but I mean, you can do that, and if you do that with the right person, if they say something that's striking or very funny or controversial, you know, you're more likely to get traction.
So say something controversial. No.
Haven't I already? God damn it! I meant to ask you if I could curse on this. It's too late now.
Yeah, you can. No problem. No fucking problem. The other. So Oprah's been doing that all week with this chat with Meghan Markle.
She's been cursing?
No, yeah, cursing. She's been doing it all week. There's been like little snippets, and like they're like 5 seconds, but everybody's excited about watching this interview. So
yeah.
Good advice.
Well, Oprah is the queen. She knows how to do this stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Interview her. Do Oprah.
That's the type of thing kids say. Yeah, they say, "Why don't you interview the Queen? That'd be great." You're like,
pretend you're the other Tim Curry.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I tried to do with my books. I got nowhere. I didn't wear the
fishnet stockings. If you put on the garters and the fishnet stockings in the author photo, I think that would go a long way.
I've been telling him that for years, Dan. He won't listen.
The boobs now as well. Lockdown. A little pair of boobs, that'll be okay.
Well, you know, as you get older, it happens. So.
Okay, Amit, have you got any further questions?
Yeah, I had a few, but I know I'm conscious of the time, and Dan's obviously kindly offered to come on, so I'm just gonna do one. Dan, an area that obviously you know, I read about in those pieces about the future of technology. You know, there's concepts that I still struggle with. Maybe you can very simply, without getting too techy, explain to me. So one thing that it talks about is Moore's law, this idea of exponential growth in technology, and obviously about, you know, transistors and getting smaller and smaller in terms of, you know, the size. So yeah, I know it might be a tricky one to explain, you know, briefly, but where are we heading in terms of that? Because, you know, when I looked at the graph and what it shows, it's quite scary at the pace at which, you know, if you talk about exponential growth. So can you shed some light on a very kind of difficult concept like Moore's law?
So Moore's law is pretty basic. It was formulated by Gordon Moore, who was one of the founders of Intel. And it's not so much a law as an observation. And he observed that, you know, in the world of making chips for computers, that they tended to shrink in size by half and double in power every 2 years, 18 months to 2 years. And that sort of just became a roadmap for Intel to say, okay, you know, our chips are going to have twice as many transistors next time we make them, and they're going to be half the size. And that continued on for 30 odd years or so. And to the point where now we're kind of reaching the limits of physics. Because at a certain point, things get so small that quantum mechanics takes over and things get very funky in terms of, you know, where those electrons are going, you know. So they've been looking at different materials, but that's sort of the nerdy part of the hardware. So the notion that, you know, there's this constant progression and things are getting constantly faster and constantly better, we're probably going to hit a wall in terms of that. But we already have hit a wall, and the wall we've hit is software. So we're talking about hardware that gets constantly faster, constantly more powerful, but the software can't keep up. And it's the software that counts, right? You know, it's like the apps on your phone. It's the reason you have a phone is the apps. So in some ways, it's always been a game of catch up. Of getting software that can do what the hardware is capable of. Well, now we're having this video call, right? And it's no big deal. But I remember back in the day when putting video on the web meant something the size of a postage stamp that was lucky to get 5 frames a second, or maybe 10 frames a second, very stuttery little max headroom type video. And that was like a big achievement. And now we just take this stuff for granted. And it's all because the software has started to use the hardware a little more efficiently.
Mm-hmm. Dan, you said this is no big deal. You're on the Shadows project.
I mean, you guys aren't a big deal. You guys are enormous. But I mean, the notion we could just do this conversation. I mean, I remember when video phones were like science fiction, right?
Yeah.
And in the movie 2001, they had the video phone. It was AT&T video phone, and it was like, ooh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Big deal. Now people like saying, "Oh my God, another Zoom call! I can't deal with it."
Okay, I think that's a nice point to end, because there's like with the best chats, you can talk and talk and talk and talk, but yeah, leave it for the next time. Yeah, it's been amazing chatting to you, Dan. Yeah, I thought it'd be lighthearted and interesting and informative, and it's gone beyond my expectations.
Yeah, thank you, Dan.
Really pleasure to talk to you.
Same here, guys. So where and when should I look for this?
I'll post it probably before Tuesday.
Cool. All right. Well, let me know.
Because I love it so much, I normally do it the same night, even if I'm really tired. But yeah. And if I put some music in, what music would you like?
You should put English Beat.
Yeah.
English Beat.
Ska, Stand Down Margaret. Put in Stand Down Margaret.
Stand Down Margaret.
Nice.
A little blast from the past.
Okay. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Dan. Nice to speak to you.
Thanks, Dan.
Guys. All right. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Ahmed.
Bye-bye. Thanks, dude.